Welcome to the National Coherence Creating Webinars series. My name is Sam Katz, and today we'll be hearing from Dr. Fred Travis, one of the world's most published researchers in the area of meditation and brain functioning. Dr. Travis will be speaking with us today on the neuroscience of enlightenment, how the experience of transcending cultures the brain to spontaneously maintain a state of deep inner calm and inner peace, even when fully engaged in challenging dynamic activity. If you have questions you would like to ask Dr. Travis, he will be hosting questions after his talk. Please email your questions into questions, that's plural, questions@tm.org. Dr. Travis received his master's and PhD in psychology with a specialization in psychophysiology from Maharishi International University in 1988 and held a 2-year postdoctoral position at the University of California, Davis. Exploring brain changes during sleep, Dr. Travis returned to MIU to direct the Center for Brain Consciousness and Cognition. Since 1980, Dr. Travis has authored 87 papers that investigated the relation between brain patterns, states of consciousness, and meditation practice. Welcome, Dr. Fred Travis.
Thank you very much, Sam. It's great to be here, and we'll look at that mystery. How is it possible for the nervous system to both maintain silence and dynamism? This will give us insights into how we live enlightenment. I'd like you to read this. It's a description of life in enlightenment. I'll give you a minute or two. Notice the descriptions of both seeing things as before. So you're involved in perception. Thank you for this slide. You're involved in action, behavior, decision-making. But at the same time, there's this experience of something enveloping you. And this is who you identify with. Now, how is this possible? Is it a dual nervous system? Are there two nervous systems that are functioning? One supporting silence, one activity. Dolphins have two brains, as we see here. And this is necessary for dolphins. Thank you for this slide. Because dolphins have to be able to sleep, and because they're air breathing, they can't completely go to sleep. So what happens is one part of their brain goes to sleep while the other one is active, and so on. They do have dual nervous systems. Humans do not. Is it a double act of perception that what we're doing is we're aware of silence, we're aware of activity, aware of silence, we're aware of unbounded awareness? What we'll do is we'll take an angle from neuroscience, and that is the brain uses parallel networks that are anatomically distinct to process experience. Here's one example. You look at something, it comes in through the eyes, and what it does, it takes two paths. It activates two different circuits. One, signified by the red arrow, is activating the emotional response. And what this does is it colors the mood. It colors our overall feeling, safe, unsafe, approach, avoidance. At the same time, the blue dotted line is us deciding who or what is out there. And this also comes to the front part of the brain. It takes a lot longer. And what it does is it merges with the emotional tone, which is already there. Notice in this picture, you see that you don't see people, you don't see events as they are, but you see them completely embedded in the emotional response, which has happened earlier. So these are two anatomical distinct functions. What we'll do is we'll look at what happens during waking, what are the brain patterns that are involved in thinking, deciding. Then we'll look at brain patterns in sleep, and then in transcendental meditation, understanding the circuits, and then understanding how they can coexist. So here we go. Physiology of focused attention during waking involves many different networks. the top circled the saliency network. One part of the brain is deciding how important is this. And then what it's doing, it's either allowing the attention to wander and to think of other things or to focus in on what's there. And these three networks are constantly interacting. Now, in terms of the brain, here's the surface of the brain, the cortex. These changing networks first involve the top of the brain, the surface of the brain. Notice there's no cell bodies. It's the branches from other cells. And what this layer does, it either wakes you up or puts you to sleep. So this slows down in the middle of the afternoon when you get a little tired, goes back up again, middle evening, and so on. This fourth layer is where senses come in, from the eyes, from the ears, from touch. Layers 2 and 3 are processing. So the information comes in like a splash in layer 4. It feeds up to the next 2 layers. And then there is a ringing going back and forth within one hemisphere, between hemispheres. That's how we decide what is there. And then the bottom 2 are output fibers. So what we see happening in waking is there's dynamically changing networks which use different parts of these. This is from a recent article in Scientific American. It's a little bit visually busy, but what the researchers did is they looked at 1,200 people doing 280 different cognitive tasks. And what they found were lawful subnetworks in the brain that were involved in attention shifting, salience, which I mentioned, determining what's important, inner thought, the default mode network, outer focus, all of these involve different networks. Let's look at sleep. Sleep is interesting because what we do during the day is we use and reuse molecules. And because these are just inert biochemical substances, as you use them and reuse them, what happens is they break down. And we create what's called sleep dirt. That's what the scientists call it. We create about 7 grams of sleep dirt, and it's just these neurotransmitters, proteins, enzymes that are broken down during the day. We create 7 grams of sleep dirt a day. 7 grams fills a teaspoon heaping. Some of it is beta amyloid, which is associated with Alzheimer's, others neurotoxic waste. Most of it is just metabolites, broken down materials. Now, what happens during sleep is the structural cells that the neurons are sitting in become smaller. It increases the space around the cell and actually pulls the fluid through the brain more quickly. We see here on the left, dyed red, is the movement of the fluid during sleep, the right during waking. We see that it's much more abundant during sleep, and this is washing away sleep dirt. Which part of here we're looking at the minute structural changes happening during sleep. These long strands you see are input fibers called dendrites, and the little buds going out are called dendritic spines, and that's where the synapses are. That's where another neuron comes in and talks to this neuron. And you see some of the neurons are very thick, some of the neurons are very small and spindly. During sleep, the very small dendritic spines are pruned off. And so at the end, what it serves to do is help us to consolidate memory throughout the night. So this is metabolic rate during sleeping and waking. During sleep, the brain is 20% reduced in metabolic rate. Now, what's happening in terms of the cortex, the actual activity, sleep isn't just cessation of activity, but there's increased activity in layers 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. And these are generating the brainwave seen during sleep called delta. So this is a physiology of sleep. These are the layers of the cortex which are most active during waking, and so we see they're most active during sleep, getting rid of sleep dirt. Okay, it's time for you to become involved. Oh, excuse me. We have layer 1, which we talked about, is just turned down, and layer 4 is always open. So now I'd like you to become involved, and we're going to be talking about transcendental meditation practice. Since you're all practice TM, I'd like to hear some of the descriptions of your experiences. What you can do on the bottom of the Zoom panel, press raise your hand function, and we'll call on you and give me 1 or 2 words that describe your deepest experiences during TM. And what I'll do is I'll put these down here and we'll be using them for the rest of the talk. So you can be thinking, move your mouse to the bottom of the screen, press the raise hand, and tell me your experiences in 1 or 2 words. Thank you. We'll give you a minute.
Deep calm.
Go ahead.
Peace.
Thank you. Another.
Go ahead, James.
You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, Roy, go ahead.
Roy, I think you have your mute button on.
Restful alertness.
Could you
Thank
speak?
you. Another.
Restful alertness.
Got it. Thank you. Someone else?
Go ahead, Bradley.
You need to unmute yourself.
Bradley, you are unmuted. Go ahead.
Bradley was saying in the chat box that his microphone does not seem to be working, but his word for this is bliss.
Thank you for persevering, Bradley. Another.
Karen, go ahead.
Eternity.
Great.
Well-being. Great goodwill.
Thank you. That's perfect. So this is a task I gave to my students, but I asked them to write 300 to 400 words. The reason is what you can do is take a fuller description and you can distill it down into what are the key concepts. The key it's called content analysis. You take a sentence, you collapse it down to a single theme or code. The codes are absence of time. Someone mentioned eternity. Absence of space. Absence of body sense. This is the experience during our TM practice. Now notice, this is fundamentally different than waking, sleeping, and dreaming. It's not just altered waking. In this slide, we have a 2x2 grid with sense of self, yes or no. Thoughts, yes or no. Let's think what would go in the bottom left-hand cell. Sleeping, dreaming, waking, transcendental consciousness. Yeah, you probably put sleep there. In English, we say we sleep like a log. There's no sense of self, no sense of content. The environment is just a break in experience. In Sweden, they say sleep like a stone. It has that same idea. How about the upper right? Self-awareness and thoughts. And you're probably thinking waking. That's what you're in right now. There's a PowerPoint, there's a Zoom, there's the feeling of the chair against your back, there's the sounds in your room, there's the smells in your house. That's all there, but also there's a sense of self, a sense of an experiencer, that you are the core of what's going on. The upper left, I suggest, is dreaming, where you have very vivid, illusory dream images. If there's a sense of self, it's very fragile. It leaves the bottom right-hand cell. Self-awareness, no thoughts. Thank you for that slide. Now, if you were a psychologist, you would say, well, that's not possible. It's there because you have a 2x2 grid, but it's just an artifact of the fact you drew the grid. How is it possible to be aware of yourself if you're not aware of the fact that you're the experiencer? If you're not aware of this inner-outer dichotomy? Now, their objections is coming from self in waking state, which is always intimately combined with thoughts. In our transcendental meditation, we know this experience. We know the experience where we can be awake, peace, eternity, well-being, but without ongoing content. Let's see what's happening in the brain here. Brain's looking to the right. This red area in the center is called the thalamus. Thalamus is a switchboard. There's two different types of cells. One are called core nuclei. Core nuclei are clumped in the thalamus, and that's where sensory information comes in. That's output from the eye, from the ears, touch, taste. And as you see, it creates a loop with the cortex. And this loop is a neurophysiological representation of that outside experience. But there's a second group of nuclei. These are spread throughout the thalamus. They're called matrix nuclei. And the input to that is coming from the spinal cord, rising waves of wakefulness. This also creates loops with the cortex, but what these loops maintain is wakefulness, alertness, well-being, peace, calm. What we do with our TM practice is we've learned how to allow the mind to naturally transcend. That is, thoughts are becoming secondary experience and inner wakefulness is becoming more primary. And these circuits, these matrix circuits, are supporting the experiences which you so clearly described. Now, what's happening in the cortex on this? What's happening is at the bottom, in the bottom right, is the thalamus. The dots across it are representing the matrix nuclei. They send input to the very top part of the brain. Remember, this is a part of the brain which is just keeping the whole brain awake or silent. And then the bottom part of the brain, layer 6, is sending, bottom part of the cortex, layer 6, is sending feedback back to the thalamus. You're getting a loop. These are those neural loops which are maintaining wakefulness. Okay, so we have our three circuits. How can they be combined? How can they work together? Obviously, we just looked at waking state. It's completely different from sleep state. It's completely different from transcendental consciousness. How can they come together? So here's another job for you. I'd like you to describe your activity has changed since you started practicing transcendental meditation. Again, just one or two words. Again, we'll write them down and we'll work with those. And if you've been meditating for 40 years, like Sam Katz, think of after you've been to a retreat or a special long extended period of meditation, just what do you notice in activity? So we'll give you another 2 or 3 minutes. And again, go to the bottom of your window. You're practice at this now. Raise your hand. Sam will call on you and you can speak out your 1 or 2 words. Thank you. If you like, you could have the camera on me while we're doing this. Right now, it's just the my desktop showing. Thank you.
Shall we start, Dr.
Yes,
Travis?
please.
Okay,
Thank you, Sam.
Carlos.
Yes.
Carlos, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, you have a deeper sense of patience and kind of more understanding, especially more patience.
Thank you.
John? I see that you have your hand up, John. Go ahead. Oh, your mute is on. Nope, now it's not. Good. Now you are muted, John. I think I gave you the wrong. There you go.
More tolerance, harder to push one's buttons.
Very good. Andrea? And you have to press, there you go.
On very relaxed in activity and very comfortable in my skin.
Very nice. James Allen?
Bliss during wakefulness.
Bliss during wakefulness. Very nice. Roy, you're next.
Very subtle calmness.
Subtle calmness. Lovely. Karen Mitchell?
Thoughtfulness before action.
Very good.
Great. One more.
Anne, you're next.
Better coping skills and tolerance, which probably equates to what I heard, patience.
Very nice.
Thank you. So here we go. On your left are the descriptions you gave me of your TM practice. And what's happening, it's that process of transcending. The attention is going within, thoughts are becoming secondary. And on the right is what's happening when you're in dynamic activity. And we know with our TM, we're not told or recommended or prescribed to think about your meditation and activity, but sometimes analogies are given like, imagine you're taking a shower and then you go into the world. You don't have to remember you've taken your shower. So that said, let's see if there's any of these qualities on the left, which is doing your TM program, that's also on the right. Do you see any? Again, this is going to be involved raising your hand. Sam will call on you. Do you see any qualities on the left that are on the right?
Bliss.
Yes. Thank you. Any others?
Restful alertness.
Great. And where does
Restful,
that, thank you. And where is that on the right?
relaxed in activity.
Thank you very much. Someone else?
Well-being.
Excellent. On the right, where do you see it?
I see it throughout. Is that wrong?
It's a valid observation. Thank you. So this is interesting, isn't it? We close our eyes 20 minutes. And if you're siddhas, you spend longer. You open your eyes, you go into activity. What's happening is what is occurring when the eyes are closed is being seen when your eyes are open. You see that? And it's happening very naturally. It's not something that you're intellectually trying to remember. How is this happening? This is what Maharshi says in the Gita. I'll let you read it. Notice this process isn't mystical, magical, subtle, hidden from view. It's very simply culturing the physiological nervous system, moving the brain back and forth, moving the brain to one predominance of one type of circuit during sleep, then back to circuit during transcendental meditation, and then activity in transcendental meditation. We've seen they're different networks, and we've seen how they're interlocked, but they're distinct. They use distinct different areas of especially the layer, the top of the cortex. Let's see how these are put together. So we start with transcending in sleep. Remember, transcending are these thalamocortical circuits. So the thalamus driven by wakefulness up to spinal cord. And we looked at it was the top and the bottom layer of the cortex. And those are these 6 layers of the cortex. That is a wakefulness coming up to spinal cord, activates the surface of the brain, and then that sends its information back. And it's not content, but it's just wakefulness itself. And what happens during sleep? We found that sleep is in the cortex. Remember, sleep, they actually have, with animals, have put depth electrodes in the brain, and they found that the origin of the delta EEG, that is a slow 1 cycle per second wave during sleep, is in these 2 layers of the cortex. It's not lower. It's not like something happening deep in the brain and propagating out, but it's really the cortex is being washed of the sleep dirt. And we see that these involve completely different cortical layers. This is how sleeping and transcending can go on at the same time. This is how during sleep, you can have that evenness, that wholeness, that continuum. At the same time, the body is completely asleep. The mind is asleep. The senses are asleep. The inertia of sleep is there, even while inner wakefulness continues. Let's look at transcending and waking. Again, we have transcending, transcendental consciousness. And what's happening during waking, as we show here, these 2 turquoise arrows, brain activity is being fueled by environmental energy coming in through the senses, through the eyes, ears, touch, taste. Also, there's biological wakefulness. When you wake up, the whole biology is becoming more active. That's the bottom arrow. And what these are doing is these are leading to different circuits which come together and then break apart. Here we have the saliency network. Here we have attention to the outer environment. These are using layers 2 and 3 because that's the areas that are processing. Layer 4, that's where information is coming in. Layer 5. It does activate layer 1. You see that the blue line in there. That's to represent that there is biological activation, which is on top of the activation of the transcendent and also going out through layer 6. So the integration of these anatomical distinct networks is seen in the integration of EEG patterns that characterize individuals in each state. This is witnessing sleep. At the top, this is work that Lynn Mason did for her dissertation. We see there's 3 groups of subjects. There's 11 non-meditating, 11 meditating, 11 people reporting witnessing sleep. The top 2 lines are typical sleep EEG. Down in the bottom right, this is a second. And what we see here is this is the delta activity where the brain is washing out the sleep dirt. Here's someone sleeping in cosmic consciousness, you see the similar rising and falling of the delta activity. In fact, there's as much in delta activity, which is washing out the sleep dirt in someone sleeping who's experiences cosmic consciousness as a non-meditator. Because the body is a relative structure and it needs to keep itself in tune. But on top of it, it's more ragged. You see this, and we can actually count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We see a 10 cycle per second wave. Going on at the same time, we see a 1 cycle per second wave. This is the integration of the physiology of sleep with the physiology of transcendental consciousness. This next slide is very important. What it does is it looks at how enlightenment grows. On the left, we see the amount of alpha activity, how much of this integration of the transcendent with sleep is there. The middle one is TM practitioners not reporting witnessing sleep. That's the lighter blue. Darker blue is non-meditating controls. You notice that the middle group, those practicing TM but not reporting witnessing sleep, already have higher values of alpha activity during sleep, even though they don't report witnessing sleep. And what happens is as you continue to meditate and act, what's happening is more and more of the inner transcendent is being stabilized. That is, more of that circuit of the transcendent is beginning to coexist with sleep. And at some point, what will happen is that experience of inner wakefulness will just dawn. Maharshi was asked, does growth towards enlightenment, is it gradual or is it sudden? He says it's gradual, 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 and then it's sudden. The gradual, gradual, and gradual is a culturing of the nervous system. The sudden is when the nervous system can maintain those two states. These anatomically distinct circuits can coexist, and then the experience dawns. How about in waking? Here at the top, we have brainwave patterns in people doing a task. These are coherence patterns. At the bottom, we have coherence patterns of someone practicing TM for 6 months. The top, someone practicing TM for 24 years. Notice in the person who's been meditating longer, has been moving their brain back and forth, we see much more of the integration of that EEG of transcending, this alpha 1 EEG. These are these two anatomical patterns coexisting. These are individual people. Let's look at groups, 3 groups of 17 people. We looked at the brain waves during tasks. Now here's an interesting point. The difference between non-meditating, meditating, and individuals meditating, reporting higher states was not during TM. Let me just walk you through here. This is coherence in the front of the brain. The blue bar is people, healthy individuals, but not practicing meditation. The red, TM practitioners, the yellow, higher states. We have 3 groups of columns here. The first 3 group is the theta and alpha. The next one is beta, which is thinking. The third group is gamma, which is focused activity. Notice during TM, the red and the yellow columns are not significantly different. This is bringing out a key point of our transcendental meditation experience, and that is the way the mind transcends is not through control, manipulation, and directing of the mind and attention regulation. We use the natural tendency of the mind. Natural tendency of the mind is to expand. Natural tendency of the mind is to go to an area which is freer of boundaries, which is more vital, which is more full, which is an area of concentrated bliss and well-being. So if we let go, that's what the mind does. And it does it as well as if you're in waking and you start from the 3rd state of consciousness, waking, begin the mantra, transcend to the 4th state. Or if you start in CC, the 5th state of consciousness, begin the mantra, and again, you experience the 4th state. The difference comes in activity. Here we see there's increased coherence across all frequency bands. in the individuals reporting higher states. This is looking at overall power. You see that alpha power is higher, gamma is lower. What does that mean? Alpha is internal experience, gamma is outer orientation. You see gamma when your attention goes out and you recognize an object. What we see is these individuals are living life not lost in the outside world, but more embedded in the self. And we see this in this graph. It's a little bit formidable. Let's just focus on the top row. This is looking at brain preparatory response. We don't just respond to something and go back to neutral, but we're always preparing for what we expect to come up. We live in a very complex world. What we see here is the brain preparatory response during a simple task. The simple task is a solid line here. And we see that for the long-term group, the witnessing group, brain preparatory response is more in the simple task. The dotted line is what is the brain preparatory response in the choice task. We see it's less. It's a subtle difference, but let us just think this through. In a simple task, you know what you're going to be doing. So it's, if you want to be best you can, you activate all of your resources, cognitive, perceptual, motor resources. In the choice task, you have to make a decision between two alternatives. And so you don't know what the correct answer is until you get all the information. And we see the people witnessing are more stable in the self. When it's time to act, they act. But when it's not, they remain neutral. They remain in balance. We've added these together, and these make up the brain integration scale. Each dot here is an individual, and these are our 51 subjects. And we average them into these averages, and they were statistically significant, these three groups. Now, again, we're talking about an integration of brain networks. And this integration can happen from multiple reasons. And we ask, what does greater brain integration mean? We find this with people practicing TM. What does it mean? So Harald Harung and I involved in a research program where we looked at successful athletes, managers, musicians. We looked at brain integration in those who were outstanding in their class. So world-class athletes. 33 athletes who finished in the top 10 for 3 seasons. Brain integration is higher than controls. We looked at top-level managers. They had been CEOs for an average of 18 years. The company had grown. Higher brain integration compared to middle-level managers. Classical musicians, we have amateur and professional. We found that both have high levels of brain integration. It speaks to the effect of music to culture, brain functioning. The last is brain integration in short-term and long-term TM practitioners. And what it's showing is this process of transcending, which we're doing daily, is actually culturing the brain to function in a way that's seen in high-performing individuals. Does that mean if you meditate, you're going to be a great athlete, manager, musician? Not by itself, but it's giving you the basis, the foundation to do that. I'd like to finish with 2 slides. What does life feel like in enlightenment? This is looking at an object referral, self-referral continuum. At the top of the continuum, you describe yourself in terms of your behavior, your thoughts, your activity, and that's correlated with lower moral reasoning, lower happiness, decreased emotional stability. At the upper end, you describe yourself in terms of your unbounded nature, this experience of eternity, bliss, well-being that you explained. And this correlates with higher moral reasoning, higher happiness, greater emotional stability. We also conducted a correlational study. Correlation isn't causation. What correlation is exploring is there a possible relationship? It may be a third component which is affecting those two, but is there a relationship between, in this case, experiences of higher states, and that's each row. The first row is transcendental consciousness, experience of higher states during TM. Second one is witnessing waking. The third is witnessing sleep. The fourth is good luck. And the columns in red is a measure called sense of coherence. How comprehensible, manageable, understandable is your life? And what we see is those people reporting witnessing waking report that yes, they see their life to be more manageable. They see their life to be more meaningful. That was what I would expected, but look at the next four columns. That's a behavioral approach, behavioral inhibition measure. Behavioral approach, why are you drawn to do some activity? The first is for fun. The second one is for reward. The third one is just an inner drive. Notice these are inversely correlated. What that means is the deeper the experience of higher states, the less you act for these reasons. The reward subscale, some of the questions are like, I go all out. I go out of my way to get things I want. The drive subscale, when I'm doing well at something, I love to keep at it. Now, this isn't bad. It's not neurotic. It's not pathological. But what it's bringing out is there's a different transformation of motivation. Where are you living your life? It's not being a football of the environment. You pulled by the outer activity. Rather, it's in terms of inner meaning. It's in terms of the bigger picture. Here's my summary. I'll let you read it. Thank you. We'll open it up now for general questions.
Thank you, Dr. Travis. An amazing, and I would say groundbreaking work in understanding the neuroscience of higher states of consciousness. We do have some questions that have come in. Anyone who has a question, you can email it to questions@tm.org, or you can just put it in the chat box and we'll ask Dr. Travis. One of the questions that came in, Dr. Travis, has to do with dreaming. Is there a benefit or purpose for dreams in sleep, or is dreaming part of sleep, or is it different? And is that releasing stress? Is that cleaning up the sleep dirt and getting rid of it? And the quality, this person was asking about the quality or the content of the dreams. More outrageous dreams, does that mean more stress is being released? And beautiful, wonderful dreams, does it mean the same thing? So that's the question.
Great question. Thank you. First, sleeping and dreaming work hand in hand. When the sleep dirt is being washed away is actually during so-called sleep. What the dreaming is doing, that's the remodeling, that's the metabolism, that's the working through of the experiences that we've had. What occurs during sleep is the whole brain is slowing down. Sleep dirt is being released. What happens during dreaming is when at the very depths of sleep, that is when the body is most settled, these brain stem neurons become activated. And what they do is they activate three areas in the brain: the motor system, the limbic system, so that's emotions and feelings, and the visual system. So this is the activity which comes up to consciousness, and consciousness tries to make sense of it. This is what consciousness is doing. The brain is the interface. It's feeding up to consciousness, to us, what's out there, what's happening. And so most dreams are involve a lot of motion. That's because the motor activity is active. Most dreams have very strong emotional content because the emotional system is active. Most dreams are very visual. And this process is called structured forgetting. Structured forgetting. If memory is encoded in the interconnection of brain cells, then what's happening is these connections are being shaken, seemingly random, by this activation from the brainstem. And those connections, those experiences you had, which were deep and meaningful, remain, the others drop off. When I teach this to my students, I ask them, what color tie did I wear yesterday? They don't remember. And I tell them, I stood in front of you for 4 hours and you don't remember the color of my tie? One or two people do because they're fashion experts and they attend to that. But this is what dreaming is doing, is that experience you've had, which is not important, is settling down. Those experiences that are important are being activated, solidified, and so on. And the content of your dreams very much reflects the content of your experience. If you're in process of writing a final paper, having to decide where you're going to move to, maybe there's some family issues, your dreams are going to be very chaotic and filled with worry and so on, because that's the quality of your daily activity. That's what you're metabolizing. And just the opposite would be true if you have very positive experience. You like Rafa Nadal and he just played well in the French Open. And when you go to sleep tonight, you're going to be dreaming about tennis and everything's going to be happy and full and so on. The key thing is don't get too much caught up in the content of the dream. I should do this because I dreamed it or something. Rather, the dreaming and the sleep are just part of how the physiology is naturally maintaining and optimizing bodily functioning. Thank you for that question, Sam.
One other question that came in is if there was a request for you to just kind of summarize the relationship between sleep and memory, because this person notices that when they don't sleep well, the next day their memory is not as good. And he said he noticed that you mentioned it, but he wanted to ask you to repeat it. I think he had a bad night's sleep the night before, so he forgot it already.
It's a very key question. Sleep helps to consolidate memories. Research has randomly assigned people to stay up all night or to sleep, and they looked at brain functioning before and after. And they did this in a very systematic way where they gave them a task where they had a series of words, nouns, and they had to connect them with other nouns. It's called paired associates recall. And then they found the people who did not sleep, at night they could do the task, but the part of the brain that was active was the back part of your brain. Back part of your brain is the sensory part of your brain. That's the concrete present. That's just a pile of everything that you've experienced during the day. For those people who sleep, they did the task, but they used the front part of the brain. Front part of the brain is symbolic, it's association, it's taking our concrete present, what's happening now, putting it into past and future, values, and so on. So sleeping is critical for consolidating memories and is critical for taking in new memories the next day. Because when you're tired, the first part of your brain to begin to slow down is the front part of the brain. The front part of the brain, which is decision-making, which is short-term memory, which is sense of self, which is planning. That part of the brain is functioning more slowly, and your ability to encode memory is also inhibited. And I don't have to tell any college student this. They go, or any student this, or any human being this, they go into a situation, if they're tired, they can't follow what's going on. They can't pick up the information. They can't think about it in a larger context. They're really trapped and they're just following, keeping up with whatever is going on. So yes, sleeping itself helps to consolidate memory, and a good night's sleep makes you better prepared to take in information the next day. Thank you, Sam.
Good question. There's several coming in from the chat. Do you see them, Dr. Travis? Or if not, I can read them to you. I'd be happy to.
Why don't you choose the one that you think is most pertinent?
Well, could certain physiological parameters measuring witnessing in sleep, where respiratory suspensions may occur during transcending, be mistaken for sleep apnea?
Very good question. Now, there's a lot of terms in here I want to unpack. One is this term of witnessing sleep. I just want to make sure we understand that's a noun and not a verb. It's a noun and not a verb. It's not describing something that you're doing. You're not actively watching. You're not actually observing. You're not keeping track of. It's a noun in that it's describing a natural state in which the body is completely inert, is asleep, but consciousness is awake, awake to itself. The sense of well-being, of bliss, of peace, of clarity is there. It's a continuum throughout the night. It's not a series of experiences that you can relate when you wake up. But rather, when you wake up, you realize that this fundamental level of who I am, which is permeating me now, has been there throughout the whole night. So that's witnessing sleep. One mark of this experience during transcendental meditation practice has been called breath suspension. And it's called that because it was measured, because you didn't see the breath going in and out. It was an actual, accurate description of what you saw. But this breath suspension is actually an artifact of the measurement device. It was a nasal thermistor on the nose, which measures the difference in temperature going in from the temperature going out. Research that John Kesterson did, he used a spirometer, which actually records all of the breath going in and out. And what was found is that these periods of so-called breath suspension is a slow inhalation throughout the whole period. It's a whole different way for the body to maintain existence. What's happening is right now, CO2 is governing our breathing. We breathe in, we breathe out, we stop, body continues to metabolize, we breathe in, we breathe out. During the experience of pure consciousness, state of transcendental consciousness, what's happening is the brainstem nuclei governing breathing are now sensitive to oxygen, and you breathe in very slowly over a long period of time to get to an upper level of oxygen. So that's what's happening. And this experience is seen in between waking and sleeping. It's called aperiodic breathing. Aperiodic breathing, it just means the in and out periodicity is no longer there. And I think that's the case because transcendental consciousness can be experienced between waking and sleeping, sleeping and dreaming, and so on. Now, this is fundamentally different than sleep apnea, because in sleep apnea, it's actually breath stopping. There's either some obstruction, peripheral apnea, or something central. Body continues to metabolize. The brain is receiving increasingly higher and higher levels of CO2. It's sending more and more urgent signals to breathe. And then you breathe in a very strong in-breath. And then there's compensatory breathing afterwards. So that's sleep apnea. It's actually the breath stopping and compensatory breathing afterwards. What we see in these experience of suspension of normal respiration during transcendental meditation practice, we don't see compensatory breathing because it's a whole different breath style. There's a lot of detail I went into. I hope that was satisfactory.
Thank you. Just taking a quick pause from the sleeping questions. There was and there's several more. It's a big concern or a big area that people would like to learn more about. This one is about multitasking, the neuroscience of multitasking. This is from someone who said they're finding it less appealing to do multitasking, and they actually prefer to do one work at a time, one activity at a time. And they wanted to know if you had a comment on that.
I applaud you for being sensitive to what your body is feeding back. It's hard to multitask. And what actually happens is you're switching back and forth. So you're not able to actually attend to two things at the same time. So you tend a little bit to one, a little bit to another. You're working on a paper, you're watching a tennis match. You don't have your full attention on both. You look at the paper for a while and then the tennis match, paper, tennis match. What it does, it uses the part of the brain that has to do with sequencing, which is basal ganglia. What happens when you're actually deeply focusing, that part of the brain is not active. The whole brain is more awake to itself. It's a much more enjoyable state because your attention is allowed to go very fully into something and you're able to appreciate it more deeply. So continue to go with your felt feeling level. You actually get more done. They find that people that multitask, 6 hours later, they don't remember what they've had compared to if they went deep into one, then deep into another. So you're more successful, you get more input, more creative insight into how to better do the task, and you enjoy it more.
Very good. This next question, if someone were unfortunate to stop meditating for some months after regular practice, the question is, how quickly does the brain regress? I guess the
We're
person wants to
making,
know just how guilty they should feel if they quit.
yeah,
meditating.
right. We're making an assumption the brain regresses. The thing about the brain, it's a river and not a rock. So they have this realization, if you're adding transcending morning and afternoon, you're beginning to make that integration of inner silence is beginning to permeate your activity, your sleep better. If you stop transcending, you may just level off. Say you stop transcending, but you continue good sleep, physical exercise, good food, you use your brain in very positive ways. You might even continue to go up, but it'd be at a lower rate simply because experience changes the brain. You're not adding that experience of the transcendent. The other side, if you're meditating twice a day, you're not getting regular sleep, you're not exercising, you're eating bad food, you're not using your mind in a powerful growth promoting way, so your growth through meditation will not be as strong. So the one thing you know is you can't be really good for 5 years and then do what you want. It's not like those fairy tales, now they live happily ever after. It never happens with the brain. The brain's constantly adjusting moment by moment. Your brain's going to be different this afternoon because you took the time to listen to this webinar today.
Wonderful. Thank you. Have you found in your research that longer experience meditating gives you deeper or truer access to your, it says, inner drives? How do you know what you're feeling is real and not just a response to the environment?
This is a very deep, critical question. Remember in the very beginning, I started with the low road and high road response. That low road, the emotional response, is giving us initial intuition about what to do. That low road is structured as the sum of all the experiences we've had. So before we started TM, it's mostly the trauma, the pressure, the conflict, which is triggering the low road response. And we're labeling present day experiences in terms of past trauma. And then we can't trust our intuition because the intuition is being driven by something which is not true, something which happened in the past. What TM is doing, it's rewiring, it's reshaping the low road response. So that what is the response, the emotional response that comes up is it meets the need of the time. So what should happen is there's going to be a crossfade here. As you're meditating longer, what should happen is that low road response, your intuitive response, will be the right response. And then we can begin to trust it more. What's going to be your major in college? What's going to be your vocation? What's going to be deep relationships? You can trust this immediate emotional response because it actually is coming more from the transcendent. And I think that's what people are exploring as they continue to meditate, and this thought and this intuition comes up, and you say, oh no, that's not a good thing to do. I shouldn't do it. And then they find, yeah, it would have been a very powerful thing to do. So keep aware of just how your deep inner feelings are coming up. And you know the difference between intuition and intellectualization. Intuition is quiet. It's not insistent. It's very broad. Intellectualization is very pushing and it's very loud. And it's very, oh, no, you can't do that. That's the individual intellect. And it's trying to do what it's always been done, is to decide what's right and wrong. But now we can begin to rely more and more on our inner intuition as it's growing. Great question. Thank you.
One last question here. We're getting towards the end. It has to do with aging and brain shrinkage. This person was mentioning that she's under the impression that your brain actually shrinks from aging. And does TM help that? How does the effect of brain shrinkage from age, how is that helped by TM? And does it create a workaround for more synapses or getting rid of more sleep dirt?
The brain is a river and not a rock. So if you have a 50-year-old brain, 70-year-old brain, it could be in better shape than someone else's brain that's younger or than yours. This is found in aging research, and they look specifically at exercise. And elderly who exercise, their brain is functioning as fast as teenagers. Research on aging, on TM, has found that there's a difference of about 7 biological years between your biological age and your chronological age. Because experience changes the brain. And if you choose for transcending, what you're choosing for are circuits that are more broad, more global, and that's going to allow you to make better decisions in your daily life, better decisions for food, for exercise, for relationships, and so on. And that's going to continue to feed back on the brain. So don't be concerned about brain shrinkage. Be aware of how I can maximize my transcending, how I can maximize my sleep, my exercise. And then the brain's a work in progress. It's constantly self-adapting, and it will allow you to be clear for a very long time. Thank you very much for having me part of your webinar, Sam.
Oh, this has been absolutely wonderful, Dr. Travis. And listening to you, one feels that not only have they learned, they have more information, but the brain has actually improved during it. So as you mentioned, so that's absolutely wonderful. I wanted to mention a couple of events that are coming up. One event, which I'm bringing up right now, is, here we go. Today at 4 p.m. Central Time, we have one of the top revolutionary sports coaches, Steve Yellen, and who will be talking about fluid motion and peak performance. And that will be at 4 p.m. Central Time. It won't be on this Zoom channel. Go to tmevents.org and you'll find the link there. That's 4 o'clock today. And next week on Saturday, a week from yesterday, on this National Creating Coherence webinar, we have Dr. Bevan Morris, the President Emeritus of Maharishi International University. I should actually introduce him as the legendary Dr. Morris, one of the most brilliant exponents of Maharishi Vedic science, who will be joining us to speak about the history of how Maharishi actually formulated the first National Super Radiance program in Fairfield, Iowa in 1979, and how this has changed history. On Sunday, October 18th, again on this same Zoom channel, and that'll be at the same time, 11 a.m. Central Time, we have Tom Newmark. And Tom is the chairman of Greenpeace Fund USA, chairman of the American Botanical Council, founder of Sacred Seeds, a plant conservation project administered by the United Plant Savers, and co-owner of Finca Luna Nueva, a biodynamic and regenerative farming operation in Costa Rica. And Tom will be talking about what tastes great and reverses climate change, eating as an act of radical regeneration. Both of those are not to be missed. Again, thank you all for joining us, and a special thank you again to Dr. Travis for giving this insight into the development of higher states of consciousness and the practical implications of that. It's been absolutely enlightening. Thanks
Thank you very much,
everybody.
Sam.
Yes, and we'll see you. Hopefully you can all join us today at 4 o'clock Central Time and go to tmevents.org, and then we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody. Thank you.